Grant had just sworn that he watched Owen write the letter at his kitchen table. His attorney held up the original as if paper itself could testify. "This is Owen's voice," she said, a 14-year-old asking to live with the parent who listens to him. Judge Evelyn Ward read the pages. She did not look at me. Under my notebook was the Space Camp postcard Owen had mailed 3 years earlier, the Saturn V rising across the front. The judge set the letter down. The heavy paper made a dry rasp against the oak. In the silence that followed, the courtroom vent clicked once above us. "Mr. Bennett, which hand was your son writing with?" Grant answered too quickly, his right. Nobody moved. My son had been left-handed since the first time he held a crayon. Marisol Vega touched my wrist before I could turn toward her. Across the aisle, Grant blinked, then looked at his lawyer. Judge Ward's voice remained level. "You testified that you sat beside him and watched him write every line." "I did, and you are certain he used his right hand?" Grant looked at the letter again, as if it might supply him with a safer memory. "He uses both," Grant said. The correction was worse than the first answer. Owen did not use both hands to write. His right hand steadied paper while his left hand worked. Judge Ward made a note. She did not accuse Grant of lying. "Courts do not replace proof with surprise. We will return to that," she said. Dr. Naomi Sloan waited beside an evidence box containing 27 writing samples, a notebook, and the original letter. Grant noticed the box. His face did not collapse. His mouth stopped, preparing the next answer. I pressed my thumb against the corner of Owen's postcard. 6 weeks earlier, Grant had told me Phoenix would give our son a larger future. Better schools, better weather, better connections. He called the move an opportunity reasonable adults should discuss. But Grant had not started with a discussion. He had started with a decision. When I refused to call that decision Owen's choice, he produced a letter in our son's handwriting. Or close enough that he believed nobody would ask the one question a father should have known. Owen worked best when nobody watched him too closely. At 14, he could spend an hour rebuilding a connector that most people would have replaced in 5 minutes. He arranged his tools by function, not size, cutters to the left. Drivers above the mat, soldering iron angled away from his sleeve. He used his left hand for anything precise. That Saturday, a sensor lead kept slipping from the small rover his robotics team was building. Owen removed the housing, checked the contact, and frowned. "You want another pair of eyes?" I asked. "Not yet." I stayed across the table. In the Navy, I learned that hovering over a technician did not improve the work. It only taught them to hide uncertainty. Owen found the cracked joint on his 3rd attempt. He did not celebrate. He reheated the solder, tested the circuit, and wrote the result in a spiral notebook with his left hand. His letters leaned slightly backward. The heel of his palm dragged through the last word and blurred the ink. Grant would later call those habits irrelevant details. They were not. A child is not known through one dramatic confession. You know him through the small repetitions that appear when he believes nobody is evaluating him. That was how I knew Owen when nobody asked him to choose. The postcard came from Space Camp when Owen was 11. It showed the Saturn V against a blue Alabama sky. The rocket nearly filled the frame. Owen had never spent 6 nights away before. Grant sent him a tablet for the trip. I gave him 12 stamped postcards and told him he did not have to use them. He mailed one. The writing on the back began neatly, then tightened as he ran out of room. "Mom, I fixed the antenna before anyone noticed. The instructor said quiet problems are still real problems." His last sentence climbed down the left edge because there was nowhere else to put it. A faint smear crossed 2 words. Near the stamp was a brown mark that smelled like machine oil when the card first arrived. Owen had drawn a small antenna beside it. I kept the postcard inside my old Navy maintenance manual. Not because he had fixed something, because he had chosen to tell me without being asked. Owen rarely announced what mattered to him. He offered it sideways, through a repaired wire, a changed subject, or one sentence written along the edge of available space. The postcard was not proof that I understood him perfectly. It was proof that his own voice existed before adults suddenly needed it for something important. Grant and I had not ended our marriage in one explosion. We had narrowed it over years. He managed the family through calendars, projections, and decisions presented after they were already made. He knew Owen's test scores, the price of every summer program, and which engineering schools admitted the highest percentage of graduates. He did not know the name of Owen's robotics coach. I compensated in the opposite direction. I noticed when Owen stopped eating the crusts on his sandwiches, when crowded rooms exhausted him, and when a question needed more time than adults wanted to give. Then I answered for him. At school conferences, I said, "Owen needs a minute," before he asked for one. At family dinners, I explained why he was quiet. When Grant proposed an activity, I sometimes refused before Owen spoke. I called it protection. Grant called it control. Both descriptions contained enough truth to hurt. The divorce counselor once asked Owen what he wanted from us. He turned a loose screw on the chair with his thumbnail and said, "Less translating." I heard that as criticism of Grant, who treated every silence like agreement. I did not hear the part meant for me. Knowing the shape of a child's discomfort does not give you ownership of his answer. I would learn that too late. After the divorce, Owen spent school nights with me and 3 weekends monthly with Grant. The arrangement was not punishment. Grant traveled sometimes with less than a day's notice. When plans changed, his mother collected Owen, or his assistant rearranged the parenting calendar. Grant still attended the visible things. He attended award ceremonies. He paid half of robotics fees. He took photographs beside completed projects and sent them to relatives with captions about discipline and potential. Owen never complained. I mistook that for resilience. On Sundays, he returned carrying the same backpack and answering the same question. "How was Dad's?" "Fine." Fine could mean they watched a movie. It could mean Grant worked through dinner. It could mean Owen spent 2 hours in a hotel lobby while a meeting ran late. I rarely asked a second question because I did not want him to feel interrogated. Grant rarely asked one because he believed the schedule told him enough. Between us, Owen learned how little information adults required when the answer made them comfortable. The distance between Grant and our son was not created by one cruel moment. It grew through ordinary absences, outsourced evenings, and plans made for a boy who had become easier to describe than to hear. Then Phoenix gave Grant a reason to describe him under oath. Grant announced Phoenix over breakfast at a diner near the interstate. He had already ordered before I arrived. "There is an opening," he said. "Regional director, better compensation, better schools. Better climate." He slid a printed brochure across the table. The salary was $275,000 a year. There was a relocation bonus, stock options after the first year, and a house allowance for the first 6 months. Grant spoke as if each number answered a question I had not asked. "Owen would have his own room," he said. "The district has an engineering academy. There is an aviation program 10 minutes away." What did Owen say? "He understands the opportunity." That was not the same as wanting it. Grant added cream to his coffee and began describing neighborhoods, commute times, and college placement rates. The words arrived in complete paragraphs, polished enough to have been used before. I asked when the company needed an answer. "Soon." "How soon?" 45 days. There it was, not a family timeline. A corporate one. Grant leaned forward. This could change everything for him. I looked at the brochure. The future Grant described was organized, expensive, and already furnished. Owen had a school, a room, and a schedule inside it. The only thing missing was whether our son wanted to live there. Grant treated that absence like a detail we could add later. After adults agreed first. I told Grant that Owen could not be moved across the country in the middle of the school year. The state robotics competition was 6 weeks away. His team had spent months building the rover. He had teachers who understood when silence meant concentration and when it meant overload. Grant folded the brochure. "You moved every few years in the Navy." "That was not Owen's choice. You adapted. I was an adult under orders." "You were gone for deployments and training, Claire. Now you are telling me stability matters because it is convenient for you." The accusation landed because it contained a piece of history I could not erase. I had missed birthdays. I had watched school concerts through recordings. There were months when Grant handled everything at home, while I worked on aircraft thousands of miles away. For 1 second, I wanted to list every reason I had served, every sacrifice our family had agreed to, and every night I returned exhausted. That answer would have been about me. Owen was not evidence in a debate over who had sacrificed more. I am saying his life should not be rearranged to meet your deadline. Grant's expression hardened. "You call it my deadline because you cannot stand not controlling the decision." I did not answer immediately. Control was the word he used whenever preparation interfered with momentum. Sometimes he was wrong. Sometimes he was not. Grant asked to take Owen to Phoenix for 1 week. He called it a visit, not a trial. The itinerary included the engineering academy, the aviation program, 2 neighborhoods, and dinner with Grant's new supervisor. Every hour had a purpose, I agreed after Marisol reviewed the travel details. I did not want refusal to become another sentence Grant could use about me. Owen deserved to see the place adults were arguing over. When he returned, he carried a folder from the school and a model airplane from the aviation center. Grant stood beside him at the airport. "Tell your mother about the lab." "It was good," Owen said. "And the flight simulator?" "Good." Grant smiled at me as if 2 identical answers settled the matter. I asked whether Owen liked Phoenix. He loosened the wheel on the model airplane and tightened it again. "What part?" "The school, the city, living there." "I do not know," I kept asking. Would he miss his team? Did he like the house Grant showed him? Could he imagine starting over? Each question sounded reasonable alone. Together they became pressure. Finally, Owen put down the screwdriver. "I do not know how to answer without making somebody lose." The sentence stopped me. I had wanted his honest opinion. I had made honesty feel like a verdict. "I am sorry," I said. He nodded, but did not pick up the airplane again. 3 days after Owen returned, Grant sent the relocation proposal through the parenting application. The document was 28 pages long. It described Phoenix schools, medical providers, travel schedules, holiday exchanges, and video calls. It referred to Owen as the minor child except in the sections discussing academic potential. The employment offer appeared in an appendix. Grant had received it 2 days before breakfast at the diner. The relocation bonus was $40,000, payable only if he moved by the company's deadline. The position required him to confirm his availability within 45 days. He had not invited me into an early conversation. He had invited me into the remaining time. What Grant wanted was not hidden. The title, salary, bonus stock, and house allowance were the engine of his urgency. He treated each benefit he stood to gain as proof that Owen should absorb every loss. I sent the proposal to Marisol and asked her to review it before I answered. 4 days later, a process server arrived at the maintenance facility. Grant had petitioned for sole legal custody, primary physical custody, and permission to enroll Owen in Phoenix immediately. Attached to the petition was a handwritten letter. The first line read, "I want to live with Dad because he listens to what I want for my future." The letter said I used stability to hold Owen back. It described Phoenix as a future-oriented environment and asked the judge to let him leave Virginia. At the bottom was our son's name. The signature looked careful. Too careful. For the first time, Grant's deadline had learned how to write in Owen's voice. I read the letter 3 times before I reacted. It said Owen felt trapped by my routines and afraid to disappoint me. It said I used the word stability when I meant control. It said Phoenix offered a future-oriented environment where he could become independent. Some of that language was Grant, some of the accusation was not. I had answered for Owen. I had pressed him for decisions before he was ready. I had treated silence like a problem to solve instead of a space he owned. That truth made the letter more dangerous. A false document does not need every sentence to be false. It only needs enough truth to make the lie feel familiar. I placed the pages beside the Space Camp postcard. The letter was written in upright print. Owen's natural writing leaned slightly backward. His palm usually dragged across fresh ink, leaving a blur near the end of a line. There was no blur here. The letter called robotics extracurricular programming. Owen called it the shop, the team, or the rover. At the bottom, his signature curved exactly like the one on last year's sports physical. I wanted to call him. Instead, I waited until he went to bed. That night, I cleared the kitchen table and built the first version of the case myself. I placed the custody letter in the center. To its left, I arranged the postcard, Owen's robotics notes, and the sports form. To its right, I wrote a chronology of Grant's offer, the Phoenix trip, the company deadline, and the filing. I marked every difference I could prove without asking Owen a single question: the missing ink smear, the upright slant, the borrowed phrase, and the signature that looked too still. At the top of the first page, I wrote one question. If Grant had watched Owen write every line, which hand had he seen holding the pen? By 2 a.m, I had 6 pages. I did not have a conclusion. I had a map showing a court-qualified expert exactly where to look. Then I called Marisol. "The letter is wrong," I said. She answered, "Wrong and provably false are not the same thing." Marisol met me after work in a conference room overlooking the courthouse lot. She kept the letter inside a clear sleeve. I gave her the 6-page chronology I had built at the kitchen table. "What exactly do you recognize?" she asked. I listed the backward slant, missing smears, borrowed phrases, and the signature. She wrote each point without agreeing. Then she said, "Knowing your son is not the same as authenticating a document. I know what his writing looks like. You know what it usually looks like. A court needs more than a mother's certainty." The sentence irritated me because it was correct. That was why I had brought her a sequence, not a verdict. Using my chronology, Marisol prepared preservation requests for the original letter, every draft, the envelope, Grant's notebook, office scan logs, and any electronic copies. She requested school assignments, robotics notes, library forms, and other samples created before the dispute. She placed my question about Owen's writing hand in the evidentiary outline and told me not to reveal it to Grant. I asked whether I could speak with Owen, not about the letter. "He may be frightened. He may also repeat your questions later, and Grant will call that coaching." "So I am supposed to say nothing? You are supposed to protect his answer from both parents." That was harder than confronting Grant. In the Navy, silence before an inspection meant discipline. At home, silence felt like abandonment. I left with one instruction. Do not tell Grant which details I had noticed. Let the original paper arrive before our explanation did. The temporary hearing happened 8 days later. Grant's attorney described the letter as evidence of Owen's independent wishes. She said I had spent years interpreting our son until he no longer believed he could disagree with me. Grant testified that Owen wrote the letter without prompting. I wanted to stand and call him a liar. Marisol kept one hand on her pad. Judge Ward had not seen the original. Grant's attorney said it was being retrieved from his office. Until then, the court had only the scanned copy attached to the petition. The judge refused to authorize an immediate move. She did allow Grant to take Owen back to Phoenix for a school tour. She ordered both parents not to discuss litigation, custody preferences, or the letter with him. The ruling was careful. It still hurt. Grant left the courtroom smiling. He had not received relocation, but he had preserved momentum. Phoenix remained possible. The letter remained untested. Owen would spend another week inside Grant's plan while I was forbidden to ask whether the plan was his. Grant had executed the deception by submitting the letter. His attorney had architected the emergency filing around it and continued presenting it as Owen's independent voice after our authenticity challenge was on the record. Outside, Grant stopped beside me. "You cannot keep deciding what he means." For once, I had no answer. The court had given me the same instruction. Wait, let Owen's voice reach the room without either parent carrying it in. Owen returned from Phoenix on Sunday evening. Grant carried his suitcase to my porch and spoke loudly enough for Owen to hear. He loved the academy. Owen looked at the railing. I said the lab was good. Grant smiled without turning. That is what I mean. After Grant left, Owen unpacked the model airplane. One landing wheel had loosened. He sat at the kitchen table and reached for a screwdriver with his left hand. I wanted to ask about the letter. The court order stopped me. Marisol's warning stopped me again. Instead, I asked, "Did you feel safe this week?" "Yes." "Was anyone asking you to make decisions you did not want to make?" Owen tightened the wheel until it stopped wobbling. Dad kept asking what I would choose if nobody got hurt. The question sounded generous. It was not. There was no version of the choice where nobody lost something. Grant might lose Phoenix. I might lose school nights. Owen might lose his team, his father's approval, or the right to remain uncertain. "You are not responsible for making this painless for us," I said. He studied my face, checking whether I believed it. Then he nodded. I left the letter untouched. For the first time, I let his answer end where he placed it. The original letter arrived 4 days after Owen came home. Grant's attorney delivered it in a document envelope without the envelope Owen supposedly used. Grant said he had thrown it away. The paper was cream-colored, heavier than printer stock, with gray flecks beneath the surface. I had seen the same paper in Grant's leather notebook for tuition and taxes. Marisol noticed me looking. "Do not finish the argument for the evidence," she said. The letter went to Dr. Sloan. I provided the space camp postcard, but she treated it as one sample among many. The school produced essays, quizzes, library forms, and handwritten robotics logs. Owen's coach supplied notes recorded during competitions. His pediatrician provided the sports physical bearing the older signature. 27 samples covered 3 years. That number mattered more than my certainty. A mother can recognize a child's handwriting and still be wrong about why it changed. A proper comparison had to survive without my memory, anger, or need to be believed. Dr. Sloan photographed the letter, examined the ink, measured pressure patterns, and recorded every hesitation in the strokes. She gave us no conclusion that day. She only requested Grant's notebook and scanner logs. Paper, like machinery, remembers contact. We had reached the part Grant could not explain by speaking more confidently. Grant produced the leather notebook only after Judge Ward signed a specific order. One page had been torn from the section where he kept relocation notes. Dr. Sloan examined the remaining sheets under angled light. Faint impressions appeared beneath the surface, pressed into the pages by writing that no longer existed above them. The first lines were ordinary: school districts, housing costs, flight schedules. Then the words changed: I want to live with Dad. The sentence appeared 3 times, each version spaced differently. Below it was another: Phoenix gives me a better future. Grant's attorney said people practiced phrasing before difficult conversations. She suggested he might have been preparing questions for Owen. Dr. Sloan did not argue intent. She explained pressure, sequence, and repetition. The impressions came from the removed page. The letter submitted to court used the same phrases in the same order. Marisol asked whether that established who wrote the letter. No, Dr. Sloan said. It establishes that these sentences were rehearsed in Mr. Bennett's notebook before the letter appeared. The answer stayed inside the evidence. That made it stronger. I looked at Grant. He was not watching me. He was watching the notebook, as if paper had violated an agreement to forget what it held. Dr. Sloan built her comparison from 27 samples created before the dispute. She separated them by purpose. Schoolwork showed how Owen wrote when accuracy mattered. Robotics logs showed how he wrote quickly. Library forms showed signatures made without preparation. The postcard showed relaxed writing sent to someone he trusted. No single sample controlled the conclusion. Together they established habits. Owen's lowercase letters leaned backward. His spacing narrowed near the right margin. His left palm often crossed fresh ink, leaving smears. When he ran out of room, he compressed words or turned them along an edge rather than rewriting the page. The custody letter behaved differently. Its lines stayed even. Several letters had been drawn in separate motions instead of written continuously. Curves stopped, restarted, and corrected themselves. The writer was monitoring appearance, Dr. Sloan said. Grant's attorney asked whether a nervous child might write more slowly in a letter to a judge. Yes, then these differences could reflect care. They could reflect care, she said. They do not explain why the letter copies selected features while losing the movement that produces them. She had not identified the writer. She had identified imitation. The distinction prevented the hearing from becoming a contest between my intuition and Grant's confidence. The signature carried a different problem. Dr. Sloan placed the custody letter beside Owen's sports physical from the previous year. At first, the 2 signatures looked convincing because they looked almost identical. Then she enlarged them. The capital O began at the same unusual point. The second loop narrowed at precisely the same angle. A small upward hook appeared after the final letter in both signatures. Natural signatures vary, even seconds apart. These did not vary enough. Dr. Sloan described the custody signature as a simulation based on the sports form. Someone had copied visible shapes instead of producing Owen's usual movement. Grant said Owen sometimes practiced his name. Marisol asked whether any practice sheets had been produced. None had. Grant's attorney suggested the similarities proved authenticity. Dr. Sloan shook her head. Careful writing becomes slower. It does not become someone else's repeated pattern. The sentence settled over the table. I remembered signing maintenance releases in the Navy. My name never landed exactly the same way twice, but the movement belonged to me. Owen's real signature did that too. The one on Grant's letter had the stillness of an image being traced. It looked correct until someone examined how hard it was trying to look correct under pressure. The scanner logs arrived from Grant's office the following morning. At 9:12 on the night before he filed for custody, his employee badge opened the executive suite. At 9:26, the copier scanned one 2-page document to his private work folder. The file name was Owen Letter Final. Grant had testified that Owen finished the letter on Sunday afternoon and handed it to him untouched. The scan occurred Tuesday night. Marisol placed the employment offer beside the log. Grant received the Phoenix offer on the Monday before our diner breakfast. He took Owen to Phoenix that Friday, and Owen returned the following Friday. Grant said Owen wrote the letter on Sunday afternoon. On Monday, 3 days after Owen came home, Grant sent the relocation proposal. The company required confirmation within 45 days. The $40,000 relocation bonus depended on moving before the school term. On Tuesday night, the letter was scanned. On Wednesday, Grant's lawyer drafted the relocation petition. On Thursday, it was filed. On Friday, the process server arrived at my workplace. The phrase future-oriented environment appeared in 3 places: Owen's supposed letter, Grant's custody declaration, and a presentation he had sent the Phoenix employer about building a regional team. Grant said Owen may have heard him use the phrase. That was possible. It did not explain the practiced sentences, simulated signature, missing page, or false claim that he watched our son write with his right hand. A motive alone proves nothing, a timeline alone proves nothing. Together with the paper, they gave every choice a direction. Grant offered to settle before the final report. He would let Owen remain in Virginia until the school year ended. In exchange, I would consent to relocation in June, withdraw the document challenge, and agree that the letter would not be used in any later proceeding. His lawyer called it a compromise. Marisol slid the proposal toward me. If you sign, the immediate fight stops. Owen would keep his team through competition. Grant would stop pressing for an emergency move. For several minutes, relief looked practical. Then I reached the paragraph stating that Owen's silence would be treated as consent to the summer relocation. The agreement did not ask him what he wanted. It converted the absence of an objection into permission. Grant had done that throughout our marriage. He made plans, waited for nobody to stop him, then called the result agreement. I thought about the postcard and the sentence Owen had written along its edge because he wanted to finish in his own space. Reject it, I said. Marisol watched me. You may lose the protection this gives you through June. I know. What should I tell them? Tell them Owen's silence is not a signature. She quietly closed the folder. The hearing would decide the rest. Every exhibit on Marisol's table followed the sequence I had built at my kitchen table: hand, movement, model, notebook, scan, motive. She would ask the questions because this was a courtroom. But I had built the path that allowed the evidence to answer them. Grant testified first. His attorney asked him to describe the evening Owen wrote the letter. Grant gave the room details: Sunday night, kitchen table, cream paper from his notebook, Owen seated beneath the pendant light. Grant across from him with coffee, saying nothing. He wanted the judge to hear him directly, Grant said. Did you suggest any wording? No. Did you touch the letter before he finished? No. Did anyone else participate? No. Grant said Owen wrote slowly because the subject was difficult. He said our son paused after each paragraph, looked toward the window, and then continued. He said Owen signed his name, folded the pages, and handed them over. Every answer made the scene more complete. That was the danger. A vague story can bend around evidence. A detailed one becomes a structure. Once enough pieces are fixed, one false measurement can bring the whole thing down. Marisol did not interrupt. She let Grant place himself beside Owen, close enough to see the paper, the pen, and every movement. Then she asked whether he was certain the letter represented Owen's independent choice. Absolutely, Grant said. He had built the version himself. Now he had sworn to stand inside it. The more precisely he described the room, the less space remained for the truth to enter without breaking something. Judge Ward looked down at the original letter. At the top of the evidentiary outline was the question I had written alone at my kitchen table. Mr. Bennett, which hand was your son writing with? Grant answered his right. The words came without hesitation. Then he looked toward his attorney. He uses both, he added. Judge Ward folded her hands. How long has Owen been ambidextrous? Grant shifted in his chair. I meant he can use either hand for different things. Writing, I have seen him switch. Henry Cole was called briefly. He had reviewed school records, robotics notes, athletic forms, and interviews with Owen's teachers. Every record identified Owen as left-handed. His robotics coach described moving tools to accommodate the way Owen worked. His English teacher noted that he often smudged blue ink with the side of his left palm. Marisol did not ask Henry whether Grant had lied. She asked only whether any adult who watched Owen write 2 pages could reasonably mistake which hand held the pen. Henry paused, not if they were actually watching. Grant's attorney objected. Judge Ward sustained the objection to the conclusion but not the records. The answer remained in the room anyway. The mistake did not prove who wrote the letter. It proved Grant's sworn memory had been manufactured after the fact. He had not forgotten a birthday or a teacher's name. He had forgotten the hand holding the pen. Dr. Nee Sloan opened the evidence box. She began with the 27 known samples, school essays, robotics logs, library forms, a sports physical, 3 handwritten thank you notes. The space camp postcard. Each item had been created before Phoenix entered our lives. She explained that handwriting changes with speed, mood, surface, and purpose. A person writes differently on a test than on a postcard. What persists is movement. On the screen, Owen's natural writing leaned slightly backward. His left palm crossed the ink at predictable points. His spacing tightened near the end of a line. When room disappeared, he compressed the sentence rather than starting over. Then she displayed the custody letter. It borrowed the backward slant in several words, but not consistently. It copied certain letter shapes while losing Owen's rhythm. Curves stopped, restarted, and corrected themselves. The writer was watching the appearance of the writing, Dr. Sloan said, instead of allowing the writing to happen naturally. The postcard filled the screen next. I saw the oil mark, the tiny antenna, and the last sentence running down the edge. That card was not introduced as proof that I knew Owen better. It was introduced because it existed before either parent needed his voice to win anything. It carried the accidents of real writing, the places where Owen chose meaning over making the page look perfect. Dr. Sloan placed the signature from the custody letter beside Owen's sports physical. At normal size, they looked convincing. Enlarged, they became too similar. The capital O began at the same unusual point. The second loop narrowed at the same angle. A small hook rose after the final letter in precisely the same place. Natural signatures vary, she said, even when written seconds apart. Grant's attorney suggested Owen had copied his own older signature to make the letter look formal. Is that possible, she asked. It is possible to imitate your own signature. So this proves nothing. It proves the signature was simulated from a model. It does not identify who performed the simulation. The attorney asked whether nervousness could account for the slow strokes. Dr. Sloan nodded. Careful writing becomes slower. It does not become someone else's repeated pattern. Marisol asked about the rest of the letter. Dr. Sloan described pen lifts where Owen normally wrote continuously, pressure changes at difficult curves, and repeated attempts to reproduce selected features. Grant said our son had wanted the letter to look important. Dr. Sloan did not argue with him. She simply said the document reflected imitation, not natural authorship. The letter had copied Owen's name. It had not copied the way he moved through it. That difference was visible because the court examined movement, not resemblance. The notebook came next. Dr. Sloan showed the missing page under angled light. The sheet was gone, but the pages beneath it held impressions from the pressure of the pen. Indentation imaging revealed the lines one layer at a time. I want to live with Dad. The sentence appeared 3 times. Phoenix gives me a better future. That appeared twice. A third phrase matched the letter exactly. A future-oriented environment. Grant's attorney argued that he had been drafting questions for a conversation with Owen. Marisol placed the office scanner log on the screen. Grant received the Phoenix offer on the Monday before our diner breakfast. He took Owen to Phoenix that Friday and brought him home 1 week later. On Sunday afternoon, he claimed, Owen wrote the letter. On Monday, 3 days after Owen returned, Grant sent the relocation proposal. Tuesday night, his badge opened the executive suite at 9:12. At 9:26, the copier scanned a 2-page file named Owen Letter Final into his private folder. Wednesday morning, his lawyer received the relocation instructions. Thursday, the custody petition was filed. Friday, the process server arrived at my workplace. The $40,000 relocation bonus expired if Grant missed the company's 45-day deadline. Then Marisol displayed Grant's presentation to the Phoenix employer. The phrase future-oriented environment appeared on slide 6. Grant said Owen had heard him use it at home. That explanation might have survived one borrowed phrase. It did not survive the rehearsed sentences. Simulated signature, missing notebook page, scanner log, and false claim that he watched Owen write with his right hand. The source, the changes, and the motive had finally entered the same timeline. Grant had supplied and submitted the false voice. His attorney had built the emergency request that gave it legal force. Executor and architect had used the same document for different parts of the same deception. The deadline had finally acquired a handwriting, Henry Cole testified last. Judge Ward allowed him to summarize Owen's wishes without exposing every private conversation. Owen did not want sole custody awarded to either parent. He did not want to move to Phoenix during the school year. He wanted to remain with his robotics team, finish the state competition, and continue seeing Grant without being asked to choose a permanent side. Most importantly, Owen wanted no letter, statement, or agreement submitted under his name unless he had read it himself. Grant looked toward the closed courtroom door. He told me he wanted better opportunities, he said. Henry answered carefully. He said he wanted opportunities. He did not say he wanted his father to decide which losses proved he deserved them. Judge Ward asked whether Owen had written the custody letter. Did he authorize it? No, the room stayed quiet. I had imagined that moment many times. In every version I felt vindicated. What I felt was grief. Grant had not listened to Owen. He had assembled a version of him from useful facts, borrowed phrases, and a future Grant wanted badly enough to call it our sons. When Judge Ward asked whether I wished to respond, I looked at Grant. You did not listen to Owen, I said. You rehearsed him. I did not raise my voice. There was nothing left for volume to prove. The evidence had already spoken clearly enough. Judge Ward returned Monday with a written ruling. She denied Grant's request for sole legal custody and refused the emergency relocation to Phoenix. Owen's primary residence would remain in Virginia through the school year. Major educational decisions would require agreement between us or review by a parenting coordinator. Grant's parenting time continued. The judge said the court would not answer the misuse of Owen's voice by removing his father from his life, without evidence that such a step protected him. She also ordered that no future statement, letter, or consent could be submitted in Owen's name unless he had reviewed it with Henry Cole or another neutral professional. Grant's attorney asked whether the court considered the letter a deliberate fabrication. Judge Ward said the family court had made findings about reliability, credibility, and custody. Questions involving document falsification, sworn testimony, and counsel's handling of the challenged document would be referred through the appropriate process. There were no handcuffs. No one gasped. The ruling arrived in numbered paragraphs. That was enough. Grant had asked the court for control over Owen's future. What he received was a structure requiring him to stop speaking as if our son's silence belonged to him. The order did not repair trust. It created enough space for trust to be rebuilt if Grant chose to do the work. The Phoenix position did not wait for another hearing. Grant could not promise the company that Owen would relocate, and the 45-day deadline expired. The employer filled the role. No judge ordered that consequence. The job disappeared because Grant had built the offer around a custody result he did not possess. Marisol warned me that the document referral might take months and could end several ways. The court's findings were serious, but a finding was not a criminal judgment. I understood. In the Navy, a failed inspection did not automatically identify one guilty person. It stopped release, preserved the record, and forced the system to determine what happened. Grant sent one message through the parenting application. You cost Owen an opportunity he may never get again. I read it twice and did not answer. Phoenix had been Grant's opportunity. Owen had been the permission Grant needed to carry with it. The distinction mattered. I did not feel victorious when the deadline passed. I thought about the salary, the bonus, and the future Grant had already furnished. Then I thought about Owen being asked to inhabit it before he had finished deciding who he was. A lost offer could be replaced. A child's name was harder to return once adults had used it as legal authorization. Grant apologized to Owen during counseling. I was not in the room. Henry summarized only what Owen agreed could be shared. Grant said he had wanted better schools, better connections, and a future neither of us could provide in Virginia. He said fear had made him impatient. He admitted the letter should never have been submitted. Owen asked one question: why did my future need my handwriting? Grant did not answer immediately. That pause mattered more to Owen than the apology before it. When he came home, he set his backpack beside the kitchen table and removed a bent bracket from the rover. I still want to see Dad, he said. I know, but I do not want every visit to become another meeting about Phoenix. You can say that. What if he thinks you made me say it? I almost answered for him. Instead, I waited. Owen turned the bracket between his fingers. I want school decisions discussed with Henry there, he said. Not when I am supposed to be spending time with Dad. The request was specific and I sent it to Marisol in Owen's exact words. Not improved, not translated, not softened for court. For once, protecting his voice meant refusing to make it sound more persuasive than he had chosen. A week later, I told Owen the part I had avoided. Some sentences in the false letter had hurt because they touched something true. I do answer for you, I said, more than I should. Owen was sorting screws into trays. He kept working. Sometimes you know what I mean, he said. You just say it before I do. I thought I was helping, I know. That made the admission harder. Grant had used my worst habit to make his document believable. I could have treated the forgery as proof that every criticism inside it was false. That would have been another way of taking Owen's voice. I am going to wait longer, I said, even when the silence makes me uncomfortable. He moved one screw into a different tray. You will probably ask if I am okay. Probably, once is fine, I smiled. The court had returned authority to the adults in portions. It had not taught either of us how to deserve Owen's trust. That work happened at the kitchen table, without testimony or exhibits. I could not change the letter Grant had submitted. I could change the conditions that made parts of it sound possible. Being vindicated did not excuse me from listening. It made listening the only thing left to do. I returned to work on a rainy Tuesday. The first report involved a maintenance release with a missing date beside one signature. The aircraft had not flown. No one had been harmed. A supervisor suggested we correct the omission and move on. A missing detail is still a detail, I said. He nodded and sent the form back. Ordinary work felt different after court, cleaner. Machines did not resent inspection. Paper did not accuse you of being controlling when you asked where a number came from. A system either supported a conclusion or it did not. At lunch, I opened my old Navy maintenance manual. Owen's postcard was tucked inside. The Saturn V had faded along one edge. The oil mark remained near the stamp. His final sentence still ran down the side because he refused to erase the first version just to make the page look neat. I closed the book. The postcard no longer belonged hidden inside my history. It belonged with the person who had written it. 2 weeks later, Owen's robotics team met before the state competition. Their coach asked who wanted responsibility for the rover's control system. I knew Owen wanted it. He had rebuilt the sensor board and tested response delay. The answer was obvious to me. I opened my mouth, then I stopped. The silence lasted longer than I liked. Owen stared at the rover. His coach waited without rescuing the moment. Finally, Owen raised his left hand. I want controls, he said, but I need my own diagnostics. The coach agreed. Nobody looked at me. That was the point. On the drive home, Owen adjusted the air vent and said, You almost answered. I know, but you didn't. No, he looked out the window. Waiting is weird for both of us, he smiled slightly. Trust did not return through one courtroom order or one apology. It returned through moments small enough that nobody else would record them. A question, a pause, a child hearing his own answer before a parent improved it. That evening, I placed the Space Camp postcard beside Owen's toolbox. I think this should be yours, I said. He picked it up. You kept it in the Navy book for 3 years. Why? Because you told me something important without being asked. Owen read the back. The oil stain had darkened. The tiny antenna looked like a bent insect. His younger handwriting crowded the edge. I barely remember writing this. I remember receiving it. That is not the same thing. No, I said, it is not. I had treated the postcard as proof of our connection. It was his memory, not my evidence. Owen found 2 metal clips in his drawer and fastened the card above his workbench. He left the written side facing outward. No frame? I asked. I might want to take it down. A protected memory should not become another object adults seal in place. It should remain close enough to touch, turn over, question, and keep for reasons chosen by the person who made it. On competition morning, Owen completed the consent form. He read every line, then he signed his name with his left hand. The capital O leaned more than usual. The final hook rose too high because he watched the clock. It looked nothing like the traced version Grant had submitted. It looked alive. I packed the form with his tools and kept the moment ordinary. A signature can be copied, a sentence can be rehearsed. A child's silence can be mistaken for permission by adults who need an answer before he is ready. But knowing a child is not found in the future you design for him, or the words you place beneath his name. It is found in smaller things, the hand reaching for the pen. The pause before an honest answer, the difference between standing close enough to notice and standing so close that he cannot speak. If someone you love has learned that silence can be mistaken for permission, share this story with them today. Knowing Owen meant recognizing the hand that was writing. Loving him meant staying quiet long enough to let him finish the sentence.